Okay, let's get started. See who we have here. Great. All right, so I'm going to get started with the recording. It's being recorded now. And we had over 200 people sign up. And so it's pretty exciting to have this much interest and to have you all here, and lots of really familiar names and friends that I see on here. That's exciting. I guess I would like to start off with having you do a little testing of the Zoom equipment. And we have people from all over the country. So if you would like to, find the chat function and just put in where you're viewing us from, just for fun. Nashville, Cincinnati, Shaker Heights, Nashville, my people, Long Island, New York, Toledo, West Plains, Missouri, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Canton, Connecticut. Hi, Judy. Denver, yay, Denver. I'm going to be there soon. Panama City, Beverly Hills, Michigan. Great. I see Linda too. Haven't seen you in a while. Natalie, welcome everyone. Yeah, Blackbird, Virginia. So you get to see to everyone, some people at Grand Junction, Colorado. Yeah, so what fun. This is so much fun to get this going. I'm Deb Kennard. For those of you who don't know me, I know many of the names on here that I do know, and that's so much fun too to see all of you, all my friends out there. And it looks like somebody put one in the question and answer. They put in for Fleming, New Jersey. Yeah, New Jersey, this has to be a little different. They put it in the question and answer part, which is awesome. That's great. So we know all of those functions are working on Zoom. And so let's just get started. Let me see if I share my screen. All right. So just so you know you're in the right place, this is SAFE EMDR, an introduction to somatic and attachment-focused EMDR, and that's what I teach. I'm a trainer, a basic trainer and advanced trainer, and tell you about me a little bit more in a minute. And so this is who we are, Personal Transformation Institute. And so what should you expect today? Some of you know me, and so you know to expect the unexpected, and others this might be your first experience. And so welcome to all of you. Uh-oh, Siri thinks I'm talking to her. So to learn a little bit about EMDR, so people on this call some of you are even trainers. So I saw Judy on there, I saw Rosalie, lots of people who are really experienced trainers and highly experienced in EMDR. And so this isn't to teach you how to do EMDR, of course. That's what the basic training is about, if you haven't had the training. But I would like to give you a little, just a little bit about how I see EMDR and why it's important, why EMDR is an important type of therapy for us to have. And so you'll learn more about what's different about how we teach it. Like you saw in the beginning, we have the attachment and somatic focus. And so that is more the flavor of the basic trainings, along with teaching the EMDR basic model. And you can also expect to take a break after 50 minutes because we're therapists. And so we need that, right? We need to go get a cup of tea or use the restroom or whatever you want to do. in that time. It's up to you, none of my business. And actually for all of you, since there are, a couple hundred of you and just one of me, that I'm the only one that has to stick to that schedule. You, of course, are welcome to go do whatever you want and to be doing whatever you want while you're listening to this. So some of you are probably doing yoga, some are probably watching the Today Show or cooking breakfast. And there's so many different time zones that it's really early for some of you. I have some people in Hawaii where I will be tomorrow, and I'm excited about that. My son just arrived last night. And so in Hawaii, I think it's 5 hours different from here, 5 or 6. So it's really early there. And so take a break whenever you want, but I'm taking a break in 50 minutes. And you'll be invited to ask questions at the end. So I am the only one here. Usually one of my favorite people, Tori, is with me, and she's very helpful. She gets my tea and tells me when people have questions and says things like, are you sure you're recording? Or, if I'm doing something annoying, she lets me know. So I'm guessing everyone could hear me because they answered the questions about where you are. So if something's really bad, one of you who knows my phone number, please call me or text me and say, hey, this is going on. I would appreciate any help I can get. I appreciate. So you'll be invited to ask questions at the end, and we'll have some time for that. And so if you could write down the questions as you go and save them for the end, that would be awesome. And you will have access to the recording if all goes well. And I say if all goes well because that's the nature of technology. Sometimes it disappears into the vast, and I don't know where it goes. But most of the time, I can find it, and I'm going to be putting it on a place on the website. You'll be getting information on exactly how to access that. And emailing me won't make that happen faster. So I've been already getting lots of questions about how they can access it if you can't be here. And I can't always answer all of those emails. So it's not that not that I don't like you. It's just that sometimes my emails also get lost in the vast. So, and you can expect to have some fun or maybe be irritated or annoyed by me having fun. And that's kind of the nature of me. So you've been warned. So who am I and why am I here? Well, I am Deb Kennard, and I started doing my clinical practice in 1994 in Cadillac, Michigan. And I started in community mental health. And a year after I started doing that, I began working with a group of private practice therapists. And one of them recommended EMDR. They said there's this new thing, and he has had the training, and he recommended that I get it. So I did. And so I was one of the lucky ones that I didn't have too much unlearning to do when I learned how to do EMDR. And my other training was behavioral. And so I was doing exposure therapy, which was pretty much very, let's just say, taxing on me and the client. And so after I learned EMDR and I was working with some really highly traumatized people, I was hooked because I saw how quickly it worked and how wonderfully, and the client didn't have to be in so much pain, the amount of pain for so long as they did with exposure therapy. And so I just kept going with EMDR. And I was pretty much doing EMDR with every client right off the bat. And then I contacted the EMDR Institute thinking I would volunteer as a facilitator. And I ended up doing that, but I realized they were paying me. And I just kept taking the next step. I was grandfathered in to become an approved consultant when they started that with Emdria. And then I volunteered for EMDR HAP as a trainer for 7 years. And learned a lot in that process. And I also have sensory motor psychotherapy certification with Pat Ogden. And so that training helped me to bring in the somatic and attachment focus. And so my personal history, which is also probably as important as to who am I and why am I here, is I was born the youngest of 10 kids in Marion, Ohio. And when I was 20 months old, I was playing with my dad in a chair after he got home from working. And I was taking off his watch and saying, "My watch." And then he would take it and say, "My watch," and put it on him. And we were playing this game together. And he got up and walked into the bathroom and died of a heart attack. And so what happened after that formed my interest in pursuing psychology, and also a lot of being the youngest of 10 kids and having trauma in there is pretty much a laboratory for what can happen, and having experiences that can be very helpful to bring in to my clinical work. And so the Personal Transformation Institute was formed it was formed on December 30th, 2014, when my basic training was approved by IMDRIA. And since then, I've been working pretty much 24 hours a day, because it seems my thoughts even keep working on it as I'm sleeping, to make it better and to make it, to fulfill the mission of it, which I'll talk about in a moment too. And part of that mission is, to boil it down, is I have had a lifelong journey to try to be free, which that's what healing helps us do, is to be free. And I am on a journey to help others be free. And that sums it up. Whoops. I'm not free of typos though, so you're going to find that out. This is a slide I just did this morning, and it says, "What is not important for a therapist?" So sometimes people call us therapists, but we will call us therapists. Here's what I've found along the way that's not important. And this is good news for some of you and bad news for others. What's not so important to be a really good therapist is knowing a lot. And fixing things, knowing how to fix things. Unless it's like fixing the, dishwasher or something, that can be very helpful. Having answers is not so important. So again, not having to know the answers is not that important. And prescribing what the clients should do. So having this whole toolbox or tool basket full of things you can pull out and prescribe and tell clients what to do and how you can help is not that important. Actually, it's not important at all. And these things can actually get in the way, is what I believe. And they're usually what is overdeveloped for most therapists. So it's not that you can know nothing and be a good therapist, although maybe that would be the best therapist of all, the Forrest Gump of therapy, which I've sometimes called myself. But so the good news is also that you can stop working so hard. And the fact that you're here today and you're not getting CEUs for this, there are no, not even IMDRIA credits, means that you probably are someone who just is very interested in finding things out. So hopefully this hasn't been too much of a disappointment that I have these beliefs. But here's what I found that is more important as a therapist, and somewhat underdeveloped for many that I've seen. So mindfulness. mindfulness is important. I guess all of these, I would say, are important as humans to have a fulfilling life, but also as a therapist, because if we're here to try to model and to try to be present for our clients and to notice what they need and to notice what the next step is, then mindfulness is very important. And along with that is a sense of presence. And so we are pulled away by a multitude of things. Our text message going off, Facebook notifications, just the busyness of trying to fit in another client. And sometimes we lose our own balance, and then even when we are there, we're not really there. And then self-awareness. Part of what I'm going to talk about today is called The Answer. And it's kind of a simple way to increase self-awareness. And what I've seen over really teaching thousands of therapists how to do EMDR is that those with the most self-awareness are able to be the best therapists because they can see how they're getting in the way for clients and begin to work on what to do to stop doing that. And then nonviolence. So I've done a couple other of these introductions to our model. And in each one of them, I'm talking about a little bit different, going deeper into different aspects. And so nonviolence is something that we're going to go more deeply into over these next hour and 40 minutes. And healthy boundaries is really important. And a sense of self and keeping, and that can even be like an energetic boundary. It's important, of course, to keep healthy boundaries so that you can be healthy. And it's important for the client to have you demonstrating healthy boundaries. And so it can be as simple as, they pay for a missed session, and because you're important too, and you set that as a boundary. And it can be also as kind of nebulous or harder to see of how much of their stuff comes in, how far does it come in for you, and how do you sense it in your body. And at the end of the day, what some therapists do, and I did this myself at one time, especially when working with kids, is bring in whatever's going on there, kind of experience it, almost like digest it and feel it, and then kind of bring it back out. And what that will do is possibly make you sick, number one, but it will exhaust you by the end of the day. So part of the somatic part of this is learning different ways that boundaries are important and how to work with those boundaries in a healthy way. And then compassion, of course, is very important as a therapist. But the other things have to be there too. There has to be a balance. And if you can have those healthy boundaries along with compassion, that's the best way. And compassion is really a result, usually, of you being out of the way in general. So if we take things personally, or if we are annoyed or irritated or want something from the client, like we want them to do something, we want them to succeed, we want them to be better, faster, then we can't have compassion because they don't go hand in hand. All of those other things are about you as the therapist, and compassion is kind of like a clear way of seeing and allowing whatever is here to be here. And then just offering, which is what we do in EMDR, is to set the conditions for healing to occur. And then respect. And so these are also the things that are the principles of our training and what makes it different. What we want to bring into all of the trainings that we do as a way of modeling this for therapists and as a way of teaching EMDR and as a way of living. And so finding balance is a big part of what I bring in that's a little bit different. So, and to find balance, first you have to have awareness that there's an imbalance. And so what is overdeveloped and what is underdeveloped is what we're going to talk about. And that's kind of the way we put it. One of the things, so whenever I start a training, and I had this realization when I was doing a training in Nashville, I was doing a HAP training, and I thought, what is it that I believe that are the most important aspects of training that I bring in? And so I came up with the 3 S's, and the 3 S's are safety, because in order to learn, first you have to be safe. And it's the same with our clients. In order for them to heal, safety has to be there. And then simplicity. And so taking complex ideas and making them simple is what I try to do with the training. And also with our clients, we have to be able to take, the neurobiology of trauma and put it in words that they can understand, so they'll be motivated, so they understand this is something real we're offering, this EMDR model, and not just something, wacky that we learned from our friends at a cocktail party. So being able to state things and, take things that are maybe complicated or maybe have a lot of complicated research behind them and make them simple is an art, because it may be simple, but it isn't easy, right? And then the last S is silly, but it could be social engagement, and I came up with it because F, which is fun, starts with an F. That's not what I meant to say, but fun starts with an F. And so SSF didn't sound as good as the 3 S's. So bringing in some fun and to a trauma training, it is an important part of keeping social engagement there. And even acting silly, we do something called sober dancing. And that we came up with as a resource for people who are sober now, and they used to have a lot of fun, and now they don't know how to dance, they don't know how to socialize. And so sober dancing is one option. But we also allow for people to use their mirror neurons, and there's never a pressure. So having that concept of nonviolence in the training is very important, as well as in our office. And so here is my short version of EMDR as a psychotherapy approach, which is, first of all, the most important thing to understand and the most misunderstood thing by people who have not yet been trained in EMDR, is that EMDR is an approach to psychotherapy. It's not something you pull out of a toolbox when someone walks in the door with trauma. It has been scientifically shown to be effective for the treatment of PTSD. And what that means is people have PTSD symptoms, and we use the EMDR approach with them, which is an 8-phase approach, not just this part. And they no longer have those symptoms of PTSD, which is just awesome. And it also works with other things, not just PTSD. And what I found with EMDR as a therapist is that I've known that all along. All the research that's coming out now about how EMDR is changing something in the brain, and it's actually, they're seeing how that activation changes, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the research is really just telling some of us what we've already known, what we've seen for years. But the research is now putting that foundation under it, which is why EMDR is booming right now. People are now seeing it as a method that is not only very effective, but it also has science behind it and research behind it. So memories and the way they are stored in the brain are the root of the client's presenting issues and symptoms. And so those experiences that have happened get stored in a way that they feel like they're either about to happen now, or they're about to happen at any moment, or they're happening now. And so that's really the reason that people have the current symptoms. They have overreactions or whatever is happening. And so that's the EMDR approach. The main part of the EMDR approach is that that's what we're looking for, that activation in the brain when a memory is activated. Where is it activated? And we don't have to know, because we see the symptoms and we see the activation coming across the face. And then finding that appropriate memory and accessing it and processing it while the client remains safe is done through applying the 8 phases of EMDR. So that's why it's an approach. And that is one sentence that is, that kind of sums it up, what we do. And it may take years to actually learn how to do that. So it's also the art of EMDR. And that while they remain safe, and it's safe enough, so it's not while they remain in a state of Zen. They may be crying, they may be feeling a lot physically, or they may not be. They might be just thinking. We aren't in charge of the client's reaction, but knowing that they're in what we call the window of tolerance and safe enough so that what they're not doing is reliving the trauma. And so that's what they found, in the 70s and 80s, and even a training that I took in 2000, where there is the expression of rage, and people are beating on stuff, and they're kind of reliving and activating through reliving something. They've actually found that that is not as effective as keeping a more mindful dual awareness, is what we call it with the EMDR. And so we know we're right here in the room as we're noticing, with kind of if possible, a state of curiosity, what's happening in this moment as I bring that up, and what's happening right now as I bring that up. So that we find is the best way to have something, what we call process, which just means to move where the activation is, so that it's no longer stored in a way that's being activated by things happening out in the world. And so the goal of EMDR is to help the client be free of the identified symptoms and limitations by setting the condition for the client to heal. And so that's a really important part. We are not the healers. We are not making people heal. We are working with the 8 phases of EMDR to set the conditions, to put the conditions in place for that healing to naturally happen in the client's system. And we, as human beings, are amazing creatures. And really, life itself is amazing. Even, not human beings. Life is an amazing thing. And there is a natural healing system that, if it's not impeded, so if we can remove what needs to be removed out of the way, and to put in place the things that are needed for that healing to happen, it happens on its own. And so here's another way that therapists sometimes work too hard, wanting someone to heal at some rate, or wanting something to happen, actually does the opposite. And there's a physiological change that occurs. Keep my eye on the time here. When the client's brain, there's a physiological change that occurs in the client's brain when EMDR is successful. The activation of the memory moves from the limbic system to the prefrontal cortex. And so this has been seen. There's a study that I'm going to talk about in a moment by Pagliani, an Italian researcher, who did an EEG study that actually saw this happen during eye movement part of the EMDR. And so this is a graphic that shows the triune brain, maybe some of you have heard of, and also so this is really why EMDR or talk therapy just talk therapy or talking about a trauma doesn't work. First of all, when big T trauma happens, the memory system shuts down, the language shuts down, and then the trauma gets stored in the hippocampus, where it becomes stored in a way that all right. It becomes stored in a way, oops, sorry. Let's go back. This is why I need you, Tori. Let's see. There it is, where'd it go? Sorry about that. All right. It becomes stored in a way that it gets activated by something outside or even internal that might happen. A thought may activate it. And then it comes up as it was originally stored. And so it feels like it's happening now. And so the Pagani research is really exciting. And what they did with, during eye movements of an EMDR session, they had EEGs that showed a significant higher activation on the orbital, frontal, prefrontal, and anterior cingulate cortex in patients. And that movement to the frontal lobes after, so during the actual eye movements. And they saw also the activation prior to the eye movements was in the limbic system. And so that movement that happened, I mean, was a really important finding, because a lot of people were kind of freaked out about the eye movement part of EMDR, thinking it's silly. And silly is underdeveloped for many therapists. And so people didn't do it because of that. So, so the conclusion they made is that the eye movements in EMDR are associated with significant relief from negative emotions. So this is a really exciting time for all of us in EMDR, because we're putting, like I said, that foundation. That's something we've seen for years happening. That it's like in 50 minutes, someone can go from feeling this high rate of activation when they bring up a memory, even if it was 50 years ago, they can, they have a high rate of activation when they bring it up. And then after 50 minutes of the session of EMDR, it could be at a 0. It isn't always at a 0, but many, many times people have relief. That relief will depend on a lot of things, and part of it is learning how to really do EMDR in a way that is effective. So the principles that we bring in addition to the EMDR basic training, or the basic protocol, are the 5 principles of the somatic and attachment focus, which are, we bring these in because they support the EMDR process. And so it's not that we're going back and forth between modalities. This way of bringing in this knowledge and this view is very helpful with EMDR. So one of the principles is conditioning lies in memories. And so it's kind of the way that, a simplified way of seeing EMDR and how people become stuck in life in general, that these experiences that happen become stuck and become memories that we are walking around being activated by, they're being activated by things in the outside world, and they become the view by which we see the world, and the lies that we draw about ourselves or the world are the conclusions that we make as a result of those experiences. And the conditioning part is about how those lies and memories are reinforced over time. So as you see behind me, I have this message, you are welcome here. And so some of you may have seen that and thought, oh, that's nice. Yes, I feel so welcome here. And then others with the same thing that I'm doing may have seen that and thought, oh, she's trying to make me feel welcome because of their previous experiences. Or others might think, I'm not welcome here. That's just a bunch of crap. For sure, I'm never welcome anywhere. And so we walk around the world, and then different ways that these memories and lies get entrenched in our memory networks. And the symptom was once the answer. Now, I haven't found an exception to this yet. I was reading this morning. I can't remember it. I took the book out in the other room. But I was reading about how depression is an answer. And in depression, what we actually do is, I see it as like a closing down of things. And this person saw it as like a contraction of our life energy, our life force. And it's very helpful when we feel like we can't handle what's going on. And so to not feel depression is an example of that. But the symptom is once an answer is, Siri keeps trying to talk to me, is one of our principles. And then integrating the body into all phases of treatment, really just noticing the body and noticing what is needed. So I've heard, and I forget what percentage it is, but that communication that we do is mostly with our bodies. And what is said is so much less important. And even though that's the truth, that what seems to be true is, even though that seems to be true, what we do as therapists is listen to the story often, more than we see what's happening. And so someone who says, I'm fine, and they're doing this with their body, probably means they're not, right? It means they've pulled themselves up and out of something and they're not really fine. So in the simplest way, it's paying attention to what's happening in the client's body. What is their procedural way of being? And what does that tell you? And what happens? What's the patterns that start to come up in the body? And then using the body as a resource with somatic resources, teaching them how to resource their nervous system and using somatic resources is so helpful if you're going to be working with people who are activated. And so we have a whole section on somatic resources and how to use those, and how to use those in a specific way depending on what the client needs. So a lot of this comes out of what I didn't find helpful in the trainings that I was doing previously. And one of those was the way that the resourcing is done. Some people don't get it, and it didn't work for most people. And it wasn't necessarily about, what does this client need in this moment? What am I seeing that tells me the client needs this? And I think two things happen as a result of that. One is the therapists don't know what resourcing even means and how to use it, and they aren't noticing what the client needs and noticing if the client is in the window of tolerance or out of the window of tolerance. And then the treatment isn't as effective. Or, on the other hand, they just go on doing resourcing because it's a lot of fun, and the client doesn't get better. They might walk out of their office feeling better in that moment, but then they go out and they're triggered, and it's not so great. So this is something I felt really strongly about having as a part of the training, and it's an important part in my opinion. And then healing is a result of attuned treatment through all phases. Attunement between the client and the therapist requires all those things that I talked about. So the mindfulness, the presence, the compassion. And there's another one. I don't think I mentioned, I have another belief that I've concluded. Some of these, and no one has been able to talk me out of these yet, so I challenge you to do that. And I know a lot of you will think of someone very specific after I say this and think they might use that person as an example. But I have a belief that if we really understand someone, we love them. And so that's also a part of the attunement, is understanding what it's like to be the client. And so we spend some time on that, understanding the client, and not just looking for the early experiences that are a problem, but also what did they do as a result of those experiences? What were the patterns that they set in place that helped them get through that, the adaptations that were an answer at one time? And so SAFE EMDR is what we came up with. It's somatic and attachment focused EMDR. And we try to use those principles in the training and teach them and model them so that people can take them and use them with their clients. And so in our training, it's required that participants experience the EMDR process. Any EMDR approved training, it's required that half of the training be experiential, and so that they are experiencing the EMDR process, which is a great thing, but it's also difficult for many people. And so this was something that the SAFE part of the 3 S's, that I saw missing in many trainings that I observed, and that it's a very important part, is keeping that attunement during the trainings with the clinician, keeping them resourced and safe while learning how to do EMDR and experiencing the EMDR process. And so it's keeping that window of tolerance, an eye on it, and also keeping that attunement and a sense of what's happening right now before you. And then practicing the somatic resources and teaching them is a part of that. And assisting the clinicians with restricting the process if needed. So in the trainings that we do, I really emphasize, how can we make this safe enough for you to let us know what you need? People have to sign an agreement before the training, just like all EMDR trainings, so that you're not surprised, like an informed consent, that real stuff will be activated if it's done properly. But it doesn't have to be. There are different ways that you can restrict the processing with EMDR, and there is no shame in that. And it can be a great way to demonstrate that in the training, so that, because people are going to be using that with their clients too, the need to restrict the process. And then using nonviolence, presence, and mindfulness. Like I said, all of those things are important in the training. They're important as a therapist. And so nonviolence is love. And at the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. And so we all know that guy. And so nonviolence, as far as we are concerned with our training, is working with the answer as it arises. And I know some of you are saying, what is the answer? I don't know what the question is. Is this some kind of a Jeopardy game where she gives us the answer first and we're supposed to supply the question? All kind of things going on out there. So, but what we're talking about when it comes to the answer is working with what some consider resistance or the defense. And so, especially concerning working with what some consider resistance, nonviolence is very important. And so instead of making the answer go away, we want to appreciate the wisdom in it and support the client so they can bring awareness to it and willingly yielding to it when appropriate. And so more about nonviolence. Awareness of the unfolding of the present moment without trying or even wanting anything to happen. So this is tricky. Doesn't mean we're doing nothing. There is a very important art of setting the conditions and keeping your own attunement there to see what the client needs in the moment. But I have found that even just the therapist wanting something to happen can get in the way. And so sometimes when I'm doing consultation, I'll see, something happen and the therapist is very frustrated and they think there's a block and what should I do? How can I help this client? And my question will be, what was happening? What's happening for you? And what was happening for you as that client was stuck? And so that question can bring up our own answers and the thing that we have done, the adaptation we made to stay safe or to stay attached. And so this nonviolence, this awareness of the unfolding present moment without trying or even wanting anything to happen sounds really easy. It almost sounds like, yeah, who wouldn't want to do that? You don't have to work so hard. But it's really not that easy to put in place, especially when you're getting pressure from clients. I want to get better. What are you doing? How can you help me? So not trying to fix is an important part of it too. And that sounds simple too. And it sounds like, yeah, everybody knows that. But there are sly ways we bring that in. Like jumping into doing something or jumping into giving them a suggestion can be a violent act, actually. Looking with compassion, and that compassion comes in again. What am I seeing that has once been an answer? A way the client had to adapt to stay safe or to stay attached to the caregiver. And so that curiosity, bringing that in and just, let's look at this pattern that's happening. What am I seeing? And how has that once been an answer? And then modeling the therapy process in addition to practicing the therapy process. And so as we do the trainings, we bring in, so I'm finding that everything that I'm doing, so the trainings, teaching the basic training, doing the consultation, and now teaching assistants and also training trainers, that it's all the same thing. Like these steps have to be followed. And I was, the book that I was reading that I can't remember the name of, and everyone's going to want to know that because it's so important. But it had the 7 steps to healing. And there was when I come back after my break, I'll bring the book back. And it was talking about how they are the same steps of death and dying. So the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And then she added rebirth and creation of new life at the end as the transformation that happens as a result of healing. It's not Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was borrowing from her. But and the importance of gentle leading is what she called it, and not trying to push something to happen faster. So there is this natural healing, and there's no shame in any of those stages of grieving or of healing or of working through whatever we need to work through. And so our clients being able to be there in a way that actually doing anything but allowing it to be here will actually stop the process or make it longer instead of what we're trying to do, which is help them get through it more quickly. So it is 10:52. I'm 2 minutes late for my break. And so let's take a short break. I am going to stop the video so then we have it in bite-sized pieces.